Mathias Cormann joins us now. Mathias Cormann, welcome.
Good to be here.
Do you acknowledge that there are risks in making it easier for people to take out loans at a time when so many are experiencing financial hardship?
Well, clearly what's happened over the last decade or so is that the lending arrangements have become too costly, too complex, and people who quite comfortably could afford to take out a loan to buy a house or to invest in their business were finding it difficult or too costly to do so because of ever-increasing regulatory burdens. And so what we are seeking to do here is to restore some of that balance.
These changes replace the current practice of lender beware with a borrower responsibility principle. What does that mean in practical terms?
Well, in practical terms, I mean, most Australians are, perfectly capable of taking individual and personal responsibility for their decisions and for their judgments. And, those Australians should, of course, be able to pursue loans that they're able to afford. Businesses and small businesses in particular should be able to pursue loan applications where they are perfectly able to handle those loan commitments without the need for excessive and overly burdensome and complex regulatory and compliance arrangements. For those Australians that find themselves in a more vulnerable position, or those consumers that find themselves in a more vulnerable position, need to continue to have the protection of the appropriately stringent consumer protection arrangements. And that is why these responsible lending obligations remain in place in relation to small account credit contracts, and indeed in the context of consumer leases and the like. But for most Australians, what we've found, and the feedback that we've been getting consistently, is that the banks had become excessively risk averse and too conservative in the context of what they perceive to be their obligations under an increasingly bureaucratic regime.
How can you have confidence that banks will do the right thing when Westpac has literally just been handed the largest fine in Australian corporate history for 23 million breaches of money laundering laws? I mean, doesn't it just demonstrate that the banks can't be fully trusted?
Well, I mean, that was obviously not in relation to, lending standards.
No, but it shows sort of a pattern of behaviour, doesn't it?
Well, what it shows is that there was a serious failure of risk management, and that is why Westpac is paying the price for that as a result of our regulatory arrangements and compliance arrangements, of course, doing what it's meant to do. I mean, Westpac clearly, had the full force of the law and regulatory arrangements thrown at it, and they're paying the price for that. But that doesn't, I mean, in the end, we want to maximize the strength of the economic and jobs recovery on the other side of this pandemic. Access and, appropriate access to credit for individual Australians and for small and medium-sized businesses in particular is going to be an important part of that equation. And right now, it is too difficult, too costly, too complex for too many Australians who are perfectly capable of handling these loan commitments. It's too complex, too costly for them to get access.
Why was the decision made to remove ASIC as the body responsible for enforcing the responsible lending rules?
Well, I mean, there's a level of double up here because, APRA is clearly the prudential regulator, and APRA sets prudential standards for the banks, and APRA, as a supervisor, for the banking system also has certain requirements in place in terms of reasonable inquiries, for the banks to satisfy themselves that loans are provided in appropriate circumstances. So, I mean, this is essentially making sure that we ease the regulatory burden where that is sensible for that to be done.
Haven't we learnt the historical lessons, though, Minister, that if you make it this easy and free, mistakes are inevitably going to happen, and you actually might put people at significant financial risk? Isn't that an inevitability of loosening up like this?
Well, we've got more confidence in the Australian people. I mean, we trust individual Australians to be able to make judgments about what is, in their best interest. And of course, I mean,
okay, but if you look at history, I don't mean to be rude, but yeah, okay, of course, we all want to trust everyone, but that's the sort of utopian model. But if you look at actually human behaviour and the way these things work, people will put themselves at risk. Isn't that why you need to have a robust system that ensures that doesn't happen?
I totally reject the proposition that you've just put.
Which is what?
That individual responsibility is a utopian model. Individual responsibility has got to be the foundation of a strong, resilient and successful
society. But then you wouldn't have any regulation if you thought the individual could sort it all out always.
Well, it's a matter of balance. I'm not arguing for no regulation. It's a matter of balance. And to be frank, regulatory arrangements when it comes to access to finance got out of balance. The level of regulatory burden had become too high. The access to loans, even in particular and including by Australians and businesses that are perfectly capable of handling certain loans to buy a home or to invest in their business, was becoming too difficult, too complex and too costly. Okay. And we're seeking to reduce that cost burden on the community, on individual Australians and on business.
Is this really within the spirit of the Royal Commission's findings?
This is in the spirit of wanting to strengthen our economy moving forward, creating opportunity for Australians to get ahead, making sure that we have the strongest possible economic and jobs recovery on the other side of this pandemic. And
what will the government's benchmark be for success? How will you be monitoring whether this becomes a potential problem? I mean, experts, people have broken big stories in this area. People like Adele Ferguson are warning that this is the sort of change that might lead to a financial disaster for some people.
Well, of course, as always, we will monitor the way these reforms land in the economy, in the community, and our expectation is that this will be an overwhelmingly positive change. It will rebalance the level of regulatory overreach that had been creeping in recent times. It will empower individual Australians, and it will give them the capacity to access finance in circumstances where they should be able to do so at a lower cost than is currently the case.
The job seeker payment will drop by $300 from today. Are you worried about the impact of taking that money out of the economy?
Well, the job seeker payment is still $250 a fortnight higher than it was prior to this pandemic. I mean, it was always clear that the 6-month support through the enhanced job seeker arrangement, where we effectively doubled the level of job seeker payment, was temporary. We've extended it, at a lower level for another 3 months to the end of December. We've also lifted the amount of money individual Australians on job seeker are able to earn before they lose any of their job seeker support from $105 to $300 a fortnight. So people are able to earn more while still keeping that enhanced job seeker support. So we believe that we've got the right balance here. I mean, the feedback that we've been getting increasingly from business is that they are finding it at a time of comparatively higher unemployment increasingly difficult to get new workers because too many perhaps are finding it more attractive to continue to rely on the higher and highly elevated job seeker payment than to accept some of the jobs that have been put on offer.
So if that's the case, let's say, in somewhere like Perth, that can't be the case somewhere like in Victoria where there's been a forced shutdown, right?
Well, again, I mean, this was a 6-month temporary transitional support measure. It's historically unprecedented. We doubled the level of job seeker support. We believe it's appropriate for this to be phased down. The economy has overwhelmingly recovered. In Victoria, of course, I mean, JobKeeper will continue to be accessed at a much higher rate than elsewhere in the country because businesses there are likely to need that support for longer. And there are, of course, other supports that are available as well.
This is, of course, your last budget. So given that, do you think that there should be a corporate tax cut? What's your view on that?
Well, my view is that we, as an open trading economy, as a capital importing economy, like an economy that relies on foreign investment to maximise our economic opportunities and the opportunities for individual Australians to get a job, to pursue a career and to get ahead, that we need to ensure that our tax policy settings are internationally competitive. So in that context, of course, and we've already flagged, we always should consider how we can best incentivise incentivize and give confidence to business to invest in their future growth and success, because a business that grows, that is profitable, that is viable, that is growing, will hire more Australians. And that is what we want. We want businesses to hire more Australians so that more Australians are paying income tax to the government.
I think everyone agrees that we want more business to hire more Australians. It's about how they do it, right? So do you think that if they were to pay a lower corporate tax cut, that they would do that?
Well, look, I'm not going to go through individual measures in the budget, but what I'm saying to you is we're certainly very focused on making sure that the tax policy settings are right and that the incentives for business are there to invest in their future growth and success, because we know that a growing and successful business will hire more Australians, and that is what the Australian economy needs right now. Just
finally, Mathias Cormann, a lot's been written about the potential announcement of a kind of wage subsidy scheme in the budget. Is there anything you can tell me about how you think a program like that might work or might be successful?
The budget will be delivered on the 6th of October.
I know, I've written down the date,
at 7:30 p.m.
As a concept, what do you think in terms of, I mean, we've seen international examples, announcements in the UK, other countries of these kinds of schemes to as your sort of next phase after JobKeeper. What are the kind of benchmarks for success for you?
Patricia, as I've told you over the last 7 years, we've known each other for a long time. I'm a part of the decision makers. I'm not a commentator. I'm very happy to talk to you about what it is that we've decided to do when the budget is delivered on the 6th of October at 7:30 p.m. by the Treasurer. Up until that time, I will leave the budget speculation to good people like you and other commentators around the place.
OK, people will continue to speculate. How far under 6% do you think the jobless rate should have to be before the government starts focusing on repaying debt?
Well, I think there's been a level of misinterpretation here. I mean, budget repair is not something that we will wait until the jobless rate is below 6% or the economy has recovered to a certain level. I mean, what we've said and what the Treasurer has said is that our priority, in a first phase will be on the economic and jobs recovery. And the economic and jobs recovery in itself will help to repair the budget, because as more jobs are created, as the economy grows more strongly, more revenue will be generated as more people get into work, and payments will go down as fewer Australians will have to rely on income support through the welfare system. So that first phase is very much also a first phase of budget repair. And of course, what we have said is that as we are looking to maximise the strength of the recovery, what we won't be doing, we won't be repairing the budget on the back of a higher tax burden on the economy or based on excessive austerity. What we will be doing is pursuing a growth agenda which will lead to more government revenue as well and lower payments on welfare, at the same time as over time, as is appropriate, to control expenditure growth moving forward.
Mathias Cormann, thanks for joining me.
Always good to talk to you.